So what I want to do here is make a video on Storm. And what I'm hoping is that at the end of all this, you'll have an understanding of who her character is, as well as how she's changed over the years. Now, because Storm's origin comes to us following her introduction, what I want to do here is jump into her backstory and then wrap around with her introduction into Marvel Comics. So in order to pull Storm's backstory together, we're going to have to draw on four main sources: Uncanny X-Men issues number 102 and number 117, as well as Storm's 2005 and 2006 miniseries. Starting with her 2006 miniseries, we learn that her father, a man named David Monroe, had fallen in love and married a princess from Kenya named Nadir. Due to her love for David combined with her desire to see the world, Nadir moved to New York with David, where they took up residence in Harlem. However, because race relations between blacks and whites were strained, with violence from whites towards blacks increasing in frequency and the events leading up to the civil rights movement, by 1951, Nadir had feared for the safety of herself, David, and Storm, and so 6 months after the birth of Storm, the family moved to Cairo, Egypt. And picking up with Uncanny X-Men issue number 102, we learn that following their arrival, the Suez Crisis broke out. Now, deviating away from this origin for a second, this instance is one of the reasons why so many fans loved Chris Claremont. The Suez Crisis was a real-world event that took place in 1956 when Israel, France, and Britain launched an invasion of Egypt to seize control of the Suez Canal. While the United Nations had forced them to withdraw, Chris Claremont took this event and then folded it into the story. During the Suez War, Storm's family was caught in the bombing runs, and while her father had tried to get the family to safety, both he and Storm's mother were killed when a plane crashed into their home. And so while Storm was eventually able to dig herself out, the emotional turmoil of her panic combined with losing her parents caused Storm to develop an extreme case of claustrophobia. Now at this point, we transition to Uncanny X-Men issue number 117. While this is only a very short scene, this actually gives us the first time Storm had met Xavier, as well as an explanation of her life following the death of her parents. What we learn is that when she was 6 years old, she had been trained to operate as an expert thief by a man named Ahmed El-Jabbar. Where we don't learn much about him initially, what Claremont tells us is that Storm had been assigned the task of pickpocketing Charles Xavier. While Storm is successful in stealing Xavier's wallet, her actions draw his attention. Using his abilities to freeze her in place, Xavier is able to take his wallet back, but draws the attention of a man named Ahmad Farouk, which leads him down the road to his own origin story and the basis for starting the X-Men. Moving over to the 2005 series titled Before the Storm, we learn more about Storm under the tutelage of Ahmed El-Jabbar. What we're told is that Ahmed operated in a fashion similar to Fagin from the Oliver Twist stories, in that he serves as the mentor of Storm among other children thieves and uses them in deals with individuals looking to attain artifacts illegally. After meeting with a man named Barrett, Ahmed assigns Storm and 2 others to enter the Tomb of Apocalypse and capture an item referred to as the Opal. After passing several booby traps and acquiring the artifact, Storm and her group come face to face with the henchman of Ozymandias, the immortal stone servant of Apocalypse, who transcribes his visions of the past and the future on stone. After defeating the henchman, Ozymandias captures Storm, but after realizing who she is from his visions of the future, Ozymandias explains to Storm that she's actually destined to become an extremely powerful individual and member of the X-Men. In addition to this, Ozymandias tells Storm that she'll rise to become both a savior and a provider for the people of Kenya, which will lead her to becoming viewed as a god. Now transitioning back to Storm's 2006 miniseries, we learn that following her time with Ahmed, Storm took up residence with a second group of thieves. Operating outside of Cairo in the mountains, Storm and the other members of her group would frequently venture into the city to get supplies. When Storm's ability to operate as a thief is questioned by some of her group, she chooses to prove herself by stealing a camera belonging to a tourist. As Storm's running away, one of the other thieves knocks her down, allowing the man and his group to gain ground on her. However, when he takes aim to shoot, Storm's powers manifest, resulting in a lightning storm, in addition to her eyes glowing bright and fog coming in. Following her escape, we learn that the man was actually part of a group that captures and sells mutants. After retreating back to her village, the man alongside his group arrive after purchasing information as to where it was the storm was located. Launching an attack against the group, the actions of the man draw the attention of a young T'Challa. While the men are able to shoot Storm with a tranquilizer, T'Challa arrives and begins to fight them. Due to his heritage as part of the Panther tribe from Wakanda, T'Challa demonstrates exceptional hand-to-hand combat. Overcoming the man and knocking him unconscious, T'Challa takes Storm back to her group. Now, the relationship that forms between T'Challa and Storm following their first encounter is of stupendous importance here. The reason why is that while the two of them share private moments with one another and a love eventually forms, Storm views herself as the opposite of what T'Challa deserves. In Storm's eyes, she hails from the lowest caste of society, a person with no family, no wealth, and a past mired in acts that she deemed necessary, but is not really proud of. T'Challa, however, is a prince hailing from a family with a strong heritage of Black Panthers and incredible wealth. And so while the two do share a love for one another, their roads inevitably lead them down separate paths for their lives. T'Challa would go on to become Black Panther, and Storm would go on to become a member of the X-Men. So again, wrapping this origin story back around, Storm initially appeared in Giant Size X-Men issue number 1 and was created by artist David Cockrum as part of the new Marvel lineup in an effort to relaunch the brand. As we had discussed in previous videos, the X-Men series under Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had not achieved the level of success as other publications. While some may say this was due to a lack of adequate storytelling, others point to the fact that the Marvel community already had established teams in the form of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. Regardless of the reasons for the lackluster sales, however, the title was cancelled with issue number 93 in 1975, and under editor-in-chief Roy Thomas was relaunched the same year using a more diverse lineup. To this end, where Giant Size X-Men saw the introduction of characters like Colossus and Wolverine, it also saw the introduction of Storm. In an interview with Wizard magazine in 1993 titled How a Typhoon Blew in Success, David Cockrum had stated that initially Storm was a combination of two characters. The first was Typhoon, who was a villain largely associated with Hercules of the Olympians, and the second was Felicia Hardy, a notable villainess of Spider-Man Peter Parker. Established as a being with the power to manipulate hurricanes and tornadoes, David Cockrum sought to combine and expand the elemental abilities of Typhoon into the physical appearance of Black Cat to produce a male hero. However, because Marvel was looking to break away from the tradition of all-male superhero teams, Roy Thomas had David Cockrum modify his creation into a woman who could become part of the new X-Men lineup. Following this, and with Chris Claremont headlining the series, Marvel wasted no time establishing the fact that Storm was not only a powerful force in Marvel Comics, but a strong lead for young female readers. The reason for this was that at the time, women and African Americans in comics were really depicted in strong leadership roles. Susan Storm was considered the first lady of Marvel Comics, but she largely operated second to Reed Richards, as opposed to being an equal. In truth, the only real characters Marvel had as lead African Americans in their comics were Luke Cage and Black Panther, and while young black men found these heroes identifiable, young black women were still left out. When Storm was introduced, she had basically changed all that. Not only was she a powerful black woman in comics, under Chris Claremont, she was also placed into a leadership role. In Uncanny X-Men issues number 138 and 139 following the perceived death of Jean Grey, Claremont wrote Cyclops out of the X-Men team and introduced Storm in his place to operate as a leader. With these same publications seeing the introduction of Kitty Pryde, Storm's role as head of the X-Men team was expanded beyond the role of a field leader to a more personal level, when she became involved in Kitty Pryde's life by teaching her the ins and outs of what it means to be a woman, as well as how to deal with a world that disliked mutants. Now, touching back on her role as a field commander, her ability to lead the team effectively was best demonstrated in Uncanny X-Men issues 269 through 270 in a story titled This Angel Fallen. Centering on Storm following Angel's kidnapping at the hands of Morlocks, the story saw Storm leading Colossus, Kitty Pryde, and Nightcrawler into the tunnels below New York to rescue Warren Worthington. Coming face to face with Callisto, the Morlock leader, Storm's physical and character strength was demonstrated in her ability to overcome Callisto in a battle to the death, as well as allow the Morlocks to maintain their autonomy as a society unto themselves. While future stories like To Have and Have Not and Uncanny X-Men issue number 173 would see Storm don a new look with a mohawk and leather, a major focal point of her character was a feeling of being split between her role as a member of the X-Men and her place as leader of her people in Kenya. This element of her character was fleshed out further by Chris Claremont over a series of background stories in Uncanny X-Men issues 253 to 267, which saw her traveling back to Africa, but also saw the introduction of Gambit. While I wouldn't see her return to Kenya as a leader, in this story, Storm was de-aged by a villain known as the Nanny, seeking to use the world's mutant children as an army, and while Storm was able to overpower Nanny, her mind was wiped of all of her memories. Appearing in Cairo and unintentionally causing a thunderstorm that lasted several days, the Storm was discovered by emergency crews and hospitalized. Escaping the hospital due to her fear of not knowing where she was, Storm reverted back to her life of thieving on the streets of Cairo. Drawing the attention of the Shadow King, a multiversal representation of humanity's darker nature, the Shadow King sought to use Storm's vast abilities to manipulate the weather in an effort to conquer the world. Pursuing and cornering her in the midst of a robbery, the story saw the introduction of Gambit, who happened to be robbing the same house. Helping Storm to escape the Shadow King and his minions, the two began a friendship that would actually see Storm advocating for Gambit to be allowed to become part of the X-Men team. Now, toward the end of Chris Claremont's run in 1991, going forward with the launch of X-Men Volume 2, Storm's popularity had reached a fever pitch. And with the removal of the original X-Men team as the lineup of X-Factor and their reintroduction into the current X-Men roster, Marvel split the group in half, with Storm leading the blue team composed of Jean Grey, Colossus, Bishop, Archangel, and Nightcrawler. However, as the 1990s turned into the 2000s, the popularity of the X-Men was beginning to wane, and while Chris Claremont would return to the series in 2001 under the moniker of Extreme X-Men, the title was unable to regain its former glory. As a result, under the direction of Joe Quesada, Marvel initiated the House of M event in an effort to consolidate the mutant population, reduce its number, and focus on more character-driven stories. But because Storm was such a popular character in comics, Marvel had her keep her ability to manipulate the weather, and under Reginald Hudlin, folded her character over into the Black Panther series and introduced their marriage. As two of Marvel's most prominent black characters, the marriage between Black Panther and Storm actually received mixed reviews from fans. Where some thought it made sense, others thought it was simply thrown in as a publicity stunt to pull in black readers, as the marriage coincided with the events of Civil War. Ultimately though, the doom and gloom crowd won out when Marvel annulled the marriage during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men. As it was explained to us, when the Phoenix Force returned in pursuit of Hope Summers, it was attacked by Iron Man and Hank Pym. Looking to see the Phoenix Force destroyed, it was actually split into 5 pieces, each one merging with Emma Frost, Cyclops, Colossus, Namor, and Magik. While the story would continue on with the existence of the Phoenix Five, during the conflict, Namor the Submariner used his powers over his portion of the Phoenix Force to attack and destroy Wakanda. Because Storm had previously allied herself with the X-Men in an effort to stop the Phoenix Five, after learning of Wakanda's destruction, she returned only to be told by Black Panther that all the X-Men had been branded as enemies of Wakanda and that their marriage had been annulled. Following this, both Black Panther and Storm fans were absolutely livid. The reason being because not only had the marriage appeared to be a publicity stunt, but rather than doing something to drive interest in the marriage, Marvel simply killed it off over the course of a single page. For many fans, Storm's past was mired in failed relationships, and when the opportunity to find happiness presented itself, Marvel wrote the marriage out of existence. Furthermore, Black Panther fans had enjoyed the fact that T'Challa had always been written in a manner that depicted honor and courage, but when Wakanda was destroyed, the honor and courage fans had come to expect was turned into anger and spite. Now, following the end of the marriage between Storm and Black Panther, Storm would go on to be featured as part of Jason Aaron's Amazing X-Men, as well as a 13-part crossover series from the Guardians of the Galaxy, The Amazing X-Men, and Nova titled Black Vortex. But due to the Secret Wars event and the reformation of the Marvel Multiverse, Storm appears to be one of the many heroes that died during the incursion between Earth-616 and the Ultimate Universe. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.